Today's guest is Manuel Hinz, an operator who has built and exited several companies, a board director, and venture partner in an early stage VC. A warm welcome to you, Manuel.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Manuel, I read your LinkedIn posts with much interest. One quote recently stuck. Quote, "The bottleneck in buy and build strategies is not capital, it is people." Can I invite you to elaborate and please expand in particular what this means for the respective boardrooms?
Yes, happy to do so. Yeah, so your question about my LinkedIn post, why it's about the people and not the capital when it comes to buy and build, was referring to the company where I'm currently the CEO, where we are like a buy and build case in the education sector, but also sharing my observations because I think it's relevant for many cases currently out there. Because as we all know, buy and build or roll ups are currently a big trend. If you read on LinkedIn, like there are VC funds that are currently even turning towards buy and build or roll ups, and I think many of them are thinking it's just maybe the capital, and then maybe putting some AI on top, and that does the job. And from my own experience as an operator, I can clearly say that's not the case, because it's not the capital that makes the difference, it's the people. Because if you think about buy and build, from my perspective, 20% is about making the deal, so finding the right companies, closing the deal with them, and 80% is post-merger integration. And the post-merger integration depends on having the right people in your team that are able to do that post-merger integration in a good way, right? And I think the people, finding these people that are able and maybe even have the experience, right, how to do this right, how to make this successful, is a lot harder than finding the capital to basically start building a roll-up case. And this is what my post was referring to. And I think you can also, if you look at the board question, right, I think it's very similar. And especially also for a board in a buy and build context, I think also there is very important which people you have on that board. Because as I said, there you will have an investor probably for the roll-up case. So there will be somebody coming from the financial side. But I think if you want to have a really good board for a roll-up case or a buy and build case, I think there need to be other people as well on the board with other backgrounds. So a more complementary board that combines different backgrounds. And if I look at the backgrounds that people in boards can have, I would say like there's a spectrum of people coming more from the financial or spreadsheet side, and on the other end, people coming more from the operator side. And I think it's good to have a mix of them on your board if you want to run a successful buy and build case.
Thank you. Let me quickly get back. You mentioned post-merger integration being a key success factor, and that's heavy lifting. There's a lot of operational involvement and processes, but there's also a very, very important culture element. There's this old culture eats strategy for breakfast, Peter Drucker quote. What role can the board play in supporting the culture integration?
The culture integration is like how they can support us. Is I think like the question is like who can support us. I think it's the first question, and it comes back to what I just said about the different backgrounds of people on the board, right? I think if you have someone on the board who comes from the financial side and maybe has a long-standing career in the finance industry, so with a venture capital investor or private equity investor who's maybe a partner now, I think I would go to these guys in the board if I need support with like handling difficult situations with like another investor, helping with some acquisition that we do on the M&A side. So I think this is where these guys can support, right? And if I have something more on the cultural side, I would probably go to the person on the board who has an operator background, because these usually are the people that have been in the same shoes, have hopefully experienced similar situations. So if I need a sparring partner there, somebody, for example, I don't know, like measuring ENPS in your company, right? So employee net promoter score, and suddenly seeing, oh, it's dropping. Should I don't know, be worried about this, or is it normal in a situation, for example, after an acquisition, right? So having somebody to ask here and having somebody as a sparring partner, this would be probably more the operational background person on the board. And this is also why it is so important, I think, to have all of them on a board, because like depending on the question that you have or the topic that you want to discuss, or where you need a sparring partner, I think that's where it's important to have different people with different backgrounds on the board.
Well, one thing I heard now in your response is something I just recently wrote about, and we both know from our organization we're both part of, is the value of experience. Because I heard a lot of these people that you want to have on your board, you want them to have been there, not just to talk in theory and give advice, but really share experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's helpful, right? I think not all of them need to have that profile, but I think it's always helpful to have at least one or two on the board where this is the case, right? So, and luckily, I have to say, like, I always had these on the boards where I was like in a C-level role, like a CEO or founder. And I think this was always very helpful. I had one case where it was just an interims manager, where I've seen a case where there were only people on the board from, I would say, like the spreadsheet financial spectrum that I talked about. And I can talk about a very a case that I've seen there where things were going really wrong. But in my boards, I was lucky enough to always have people on that board that were also coming from an operator side, or also like had some market knowledge, even though I have to say in VC cases, it can be a bit of a situation which is based on luck, if this is the case or not, right? Because especially in Germany, what I'm seeing is that VC boards are usually set up in a way, especially in the early phases of companies, that just the people that have invested into the company are part of the board. So it's like usually if you have like, I don't know, 2 or 3 venture capital investors that have invested in your company, it's usually the partners or the principals of these funds that are joining your board, right? And if this is the case, like, and as we know, like I would say like in most of the people that are on a partner or principal level in a venture capital fund, usually had their career in that industry, right? I mean, there are some exceptions where people that have been operator are switching to the investor side and bringing a different background, but I would say like the majority, like 80%, are people that have basically climbed up the career ladder in a VC from, I don't know, junior analyst to principal partner, and are now on your board, right? So they've mainly seen that side of the business. And this is why I'm saying, like, if a kind of like board only consists of people that have gone through kind of like that path, it can be the case that you do not have an operator on your board or somebody bringing that experience, right? And I think I was lucky enough, for example, Crossing Age, the company that I was running for 8.5 years, I think we had a board of 5. And there were some classical VCs that were also bringing value, and especially in some situations when we kind of like had to handle situations on the financing side or other things. But we were lucky enough to also have 2 people on the board that were coming from an operator side, and also like even had industry experience. Yeah. Like one was, for example, Florian Heinemann, one of the partners of Project A, who had built up marketing for many of the rocket internet companies, and we were like a marketing tech company. So he knew our industry, and he had been an operator himself. And the other one was Thomas Wilke from 42 Cap, another venture capital fund from Munich. And in that case, it was actually quite funny. Like they had built an email tool in the past, so they also knew marketing industry quite well. And he has been an operator, right? He has built a company, has exited the company, and this was an interesting situation because at some point we, like, from the 5 board members, there was one which was being nominated by the founders. At some point, we even asked him. He was only a small shareholder in the company, so at some point he wouldn't have been on the board anymore. But we asked him actually if he wants to stay on the board, being nominated by us founders, so kind of like as a founder representative, because we said, like, what you're bringing to the table is so valuable, right? Because you have been in our shoes, you've been an operator, you know the industry. We need somebody like you on the board, right? And this is why we basically used our founder ticket to keep him on the board, even though he was an investor in the company. I think this is an example that nicely shows that it makes sense, and you can also drive this and steer this a bit to make sure that you have a complementary board which consists of people coming more from the financial side and people coming more from the operator side.
Funny enough, Florian was also an interviewee for my book, and one thing I learned from him, but also from other very successful, very very mature, amazing track record VCs, is that they're very open to having independent members on the board very early for their companies. Whereas I noticed a sense of apprehension of the more, maybe a bit less experienced VCs to be open for that. What would you say as for a young founder to not only be aware of that, but to actually push for that, to not just have the pre-seed or the seed investors join their board and have basically founder plus investor board, but also have an independent, possibly even independent chair? What can they do to advance that?
Yeah, I think it's changing a bit, right? Like my experience, I mean, I've been in that industry for like 16 years now. So when I started, it was very uncommon in a VC funded startup in Germany to have like independent board members on the board. But over the last couple of years, I'm also seeing what you just described, that there is an increasing openness to like independent board members. I think it's also a bit due to the fact that many of the venture capital investors are also getting closer to private equity, because like the two asset class, I would say, especially the VC funds are learning a bit from the PE asset class.
Correct.
Yes. Because many of them are also interested in this, and now with the buy and build cases that many VC funds are starting to support, which used to be what usually a PE fund was doing. I think they are also more and more looking into what PE funds are doing, right? And so for PE funds, what I'm seeing is and I'm currently a CEO of a PE-backed company, and there it's pretty normal to have independent board members on your board that are usually coming with a background that is somehow helpful for the company. Maybe because they come from the industry, maybe because they bringing something on the people side, for example, or bringing network or some complementary skills that are not present in the founder team or the management team, for example. So I think there it was always more common to have independent board members in your board. And I think VCs learning from this, I would say now, and becoming more open to this. And I think what I'm currently seeing is more in later stages currently in German VC finance companies. But I like your idea of saying okay, how can we make sure to have this also earlier? And I mean, in the early days, especially if you are like one of the hot startups, right, where many of the investors want to invest, I think what I experienced myself is that you have some bargaining power, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
But I think so far many founders actually didn't have this on their list as an item to push. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a good idea actually to put this on your list of things that you can negotiate besides liquidation preferences and valuation and so on, to say look guys, on the board we want to have at least one person that is not coming from the investor side, but that we nominate as an independent board member, because it makes sense to have people on the board that have operator experience, industry experience or something. So I really like your idea, and maybe it's one of the things that we can take from this podcast today, even early stage founders should write on their negotiation list, we want to have one independent board member on the board. Good idea.
Fantastic. Thank you. Another element that I want to dive into is that operators also get founders in the sense that they're very aware and they have gone through the emotional highs and lows, the roller coaster, the sleepless nights, and the elation of a great new client or whatever, winning an RFP, which is a bit less tangible for what you call coming from the spreadsheet side. If you have been more a consultant or a banker and then turned into a VC. maybe asking for your own personal experience where somebody on your board who has been there, done that, who had the sleepless nights, the sweat, blood and tears of a founder, where that helped you to know somebody that, okay, he gets me or she gets me. They've been through that as well.
Yeah, in all of our boards, there was always somebody who has been in our shoes, like as I said, Crossing Age with Florian, but also Thomas, two people that have built companies themselves. But also now in the company where I'm currently the CEO, we have somebody on the board who has successfully built an education business. So he has industry experience, but he has also been an operator and a CEO himself. And I think it's very helpful, right? And if I think also for the discussions in the boardroom, it's very helpful to have that voice present on the table. Somebody who can also support, for example, if I don't know, if the management team is describing how the situation currently feels, and especially we talked about post-merger integration, right? And the nitty-gritty details of post-merger integration, and you can build a great deal on the M&A side. And in the spreadsheet, everything looked awesome. But then the PMI starts, right? And you will always discover, even if you did a great due diligence before, you will always discover things that you haven't seen during the M&A process, and then you will find them out during the post-merger integration, and then things are starting, right? And you need to solve these things, and or maybe even rethink how this could work with the company and so on. And then it's good, I think, to have these people also on the table that know that things like this can happen and have experienced it themselves, right? Also with like large client contracts, for example, right? If you want to close a large contract with an enterprise, and last board meeting you already told the board, hey, it's going to close, and then next board meeting you're coming again and said it's still not closed, and somebody who hasn't experienced this himself will maybe say like, yeah, but why are you not able to close this, right? And I think that is also helpful to have somebody in the board who has basically been in the same shoes and also had the struggle of like enterprise sales, and things can just get delayed by 3 or 6 months because this is how enterprises work. And I think it's like so for the management, it's definitely super helpful to basically also have these voices on the board, so to have in general more balanced view there.
I just love that example of these large enterprise clients where, every once in a while just things slip, and they slip from quarter to quarter. And, some people just have complete lack of understanding why this can happen. But if you have been there yourself, then you say, yeah, some things you can only control so much. Beautiful. Yep. Which brings me to an aspect that I also maybe really want to talk to you, which is you really have been and are on both sides of the table, right? You've built and sold venture-backed companies, but you're also a venture partner. You support early stage investments. How does a VC board truly function for the company? What can you do that really supports, not just controls, but truly supports your investments, your companies?
Mm-hmm. Interesting question. So what I'm seeing with VC boards is that VC like the board meetings themselves, right? They are more the 4 times a year, I would say, the point where everyone gathers together and you kind of like you talk about the stuff. You as a management, you do the reporting. Obviously, you discuss about a bit the numbers. You discuss a bit about some strategic questions. But what I'm seeing with VC boards is that a lot of what the board does happens in between these board meetings. So if you have a really good board, like a VC board, you're not only working with them like when you're meeting them for the board meeting, but you're basically in touch with them, and also the person who's on the board will be in touch with the founder and work with them in between, right? And depending on like where they can help, I would say like I think it's also important for a VC board member to know where can I help and where should I basically step in, and also like talk to the founders, and where should I just basically lean back and maybe not say anything, right? And I just we talked about Florian, and Florian was just on the Founders Mode podcast, and I really liked that episode. And Florian described the situation where he was in a board meeting and he had his son coming with him. And Florian was saying nothing for 2 hours, and the son was asking him, and you're getting paid for this? And Florian said, yeah, I'm getting paid for this. And he said, like, I was not saying anything in this board meeting because it was they were discussing financing for machines, and he said, like I didn't know anything about this, right? So why should I basically participate in the discussion? So it's rather okay to basically not have an opinion in that case, and I strongly support this, right? So I think like as a VC board member, or in general like a board member, understanding which are the fields where I can really support and where I should basically participate in the discussion, and where should I rather maybe lean back and say like, look, there are other people on the board that can help with this. And I think that's also why it's so important to have a complementary board, right? Because then you can cover a broader range of topics with like different board members, but knowing where should I basically not participate and where should I participate, I think that's a very strong strong skill to have as a board member, right? And so this is, I think, one of the things, like if you have people in the board that basically are not having an ego, thinking like, I need to have an opinion on everything here which is being discussed, right? But basically not having an ego, but saying like, I will participate exactly there where I can add value. I think this is very helpful in a VC board. And then also like all the things that happen in between, right? And there I had really, really good examples. For example, I had a board member, also Crossing Age. It was Norbert Muschong from Vorwerk Ventures. I think like, and thinking about him, I am actually thinking if there's maybe a third group besides I said there's a spectrum, right, of like spreadsheet people to like operator people. Maybe it's not a line, maybe it's triangle, because maybe there's a third group of like people-oriented people on the board, board members, because I mean, Norbert is a VC, so he also obviously has a bit of the financial background, but he has been an operator himself. But he also has a really good understanding of people and organizations. And there was a really good, we had a board meeting, we were presenting and everything. It was in the early days of Crossing Age. And after that board meeting, he said to me, like, Manuel, do you have time for lunch? I said like, yes, sure. So we went for lunch, basically. And he described to me what he had observed in the board meeting. And in the board meeting, what he had seen was that his feeling was that there was some tension between my co-founder and me that has not been discussed, but he could feel it and see it kind of. And it basically, he also could point to patterns that he was seeing in me, how I was behaving and so on, and things I could work on, for example, and was more acting like a mentor, I would even say, and not like an investor who was just trying to I don't know, secure his investment, but he was really more like a mentor, like a coach, I would say. And this was very, very helpful for me, and one of the, I would say, like board experiences that I still remember the most, even though it was not happening in the boardroom, but after, right? But he had this skill of like seeing this and then also acting on this by basically saying, let's have lunch together after the board meeting. And that's why I'm thinking like maybe there's even these three skills, right? So it's more something on the financial side, so the spreadsheet, the operator background, and maybe the people side. On the people side, you could think about like is there, and I think like it's if you look at like how boards are currently being set up, I think like in the past, as we discussed, very often, especially on the VC world, people coming from the financial or spreadsheet side. I think like more and more people coming from the operator side now, either as an independent board member, as you described, or people that have transferred from the operator side to the investor side and are now a VC partner, for example, and are bringing the operator background due to their working history. But I think I think that's the two main groups that I'm currently seeing on boards. But maybe it would be also good to have more people from that people side as board members on the board. So people maybe coming with a coaching background, with a background in, I don't know, organizational development. And I would say like Norbert brought this skill because like he had this also from his experience in his past. Like he basically had a career in sales before, right? And in sales, you learn a lot about people and reading the room and reading what is happening, in a relationship between two people. So I think he was bringing this due to his kind of like own working history. But I think maybe it's an interesting idea to think more about like adding this third group of people coming from a people side. So coaches, psychologists, people that have built larger organizations, transformed organizations, depending on the case of the company, right? So I think this could be a third group of people that you could bring on board. And I think it's not being done actively. If you currently also with the independent board members, for example, if you would currently bring an independent board member on board, it would be usually probably somebody coming from the industry, right? You're like, okay, this is a logistics company, so we bring a logistics guy, right? So, but thinking about, and especially talking about buy and build cases have a huge percentage of people topics. Change management, right? You're bringing together, I don't know, 5 acquisitions, 5 different cultures that you somehow need to bring together and so on, right? You have like, usually you have a very fast growth, right? For example, the company that I currently work in, we grew in the last 2 years from around 50 people to now close to 250 people. So basically 5 times within 2 years. So you can imagine what this makes with the organization, right? So, and this is all people topics. And it's like, it's that idea of like one of the main things that I'm doing as a CEO is the idea of like following Mr. Collins, good to great, right people on the bus in the right seats, right? Yes. And the bus is changing so quickly, and we are kind of like, we are every half year, we are also onboarding a new bus to our larger bus, for example. There are so many people topics involved, and I think that's why, like, especially in buy and build cases, it could be really interesting to bring somebody on the board who has this background on the people or organizational development side.
Which really brings us full circle to start, where we talked about culture, the cultural element of PMI work, right? Because that's really where these people issues materialize. One aspect of your example is what I wanted to touch on is, I think one element of a board member is an advantage, is this distance, additional distance, right? I'm not in daily operations. I'm not on the business 24/7. I'm not in the weeds, if you want. And that also, besides possibly specialized skills on the people side, that also helps me that step away to observe, to have that bandwidth to see, oh, there might be a bit of tension between these two co-founders. And I noticed that not just because I have the skills, but also because I have a bit more distance. I'm not on, I'm not running the meeting. And I think that's an advantage that we can play very intentionally, this additional distance of board members. Maybe a few thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely, yes. But there's an interesting point that I'm observing with especially with private equity boards, because like it is an advantage. But the distance can be also a disadvantage, I would say, like, or there can be an asymmetry, right? Because what I'm currently seeing in PE boards is, for example, there's usually the PE investor who is very close to the company, right? The partners talking to the management on a weekly or sometimes even daily basis. So they are closely in touch. And then you have I would say, like, independent board members that are coming to the board meetings, but that are not having these regular touch points that the PE partner who's also on the board has. And so while the PE board looks very complementary on paper and the composition looks great, right? Like you have like somebody from the spreadsheet side, you have somebody from the operator side, maybe even somebody from the people side. In reality, it will still feel a bit different, right? And this is something that I'm actually currently thinking about very actively, how to change this, because I think like there's more that you can get from a board if you could somehow change that situation, right? Because what I'm currently seeing is like, okay, you talk to the PE people on the board a lot, and then there are the board meetings where you're seeing the independent board members and you do the reporting, you have a bit of a discussion, but you do not have the frequent touch points that you have with the PE board members, right? So, and I think like, so there's a bit of like, even like information disadvantage then for the independent board members, like an asymmetry in the board. So while it looks complementary on paper. I think it's not actually the same in reality. And I think this is something interesting to think about, like how to change this, right? And it's probably about creating more touch points with
Yes.
independent board members.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, and I haven't finished my thoughts there, but I'm currently thinking about like, okay, how to create more touch points with independent board members. What could be good formats for this, like, and how to do this, right? So and this I think is especially a case in PE boards. Like it's a bit different in VC boards. Is my experience. Like in VC boards, you always have like a more similar relationship, I would say, like to all board members. Like they are all mainly, usually they are investors, so you talk to all of them on a more frequent basis. But it's a bit different on PE boards. And I think having that distance, right, like creates advantages and disadvantages.
Yes.
We talked about one of the advantages, for example, to be able to, for example, observe things a bit more from the outside, being a bit more distance. But on the other side, like being well informed and also like not too distant to the company also helps you to to maybe, like worst case, not guide the company into a wrong direction, right? So because if you're missing some of the information, because as a management you will always have like at least 10 times the information that the board has. So you need to be very careful, I think, like to not guide them into the wrong direction because you're maybe missing some of the information that the management has.
Yeah, totally. And it's something I've thought about quite a bit. There's this information asymmetry in various ways, and I'm fully in agreement with you. I think one path is really to create additional informal information channels, information touch points, because nobody's smart enough to add value on a 4-time-a-year engagement basis. There's not enough context, no matter how smart the person is.
Yeah.
Another thing you touch, on this ability to not talk for 2 hours as a board members, and you mentioned it explicitly, is that requires for a person to have their ego in check, right? To be self-assured, self-aware, to know. And that is also a tricky subject because people who are in the boardroom are typically people who have achieved something, they have confidence, rightfully so, but there's a thin line to ego. How has that pan out? How any episode where you saw a bit too much ego in a boardroom, perhaps?
Absolutely, I would say. I really liked. I listened into your episode with Henry, and I can only recommend others to listen into this because I think Henry also nicely described this. You enter a room very often, unfortunately, a room of alpha males, and a lot of ego in that room, right? I mean, you have characters like Florian which is a very positive thing there, that do not have like a big ego and understand this. And I'm also seeing this more and more, I would say, also especially with like a newer generation of VC partners coming into play that understand better these topics, and that you maybe also need to have your ego under control. But there's still these cases, right? I mean, and I like that how Henry described it, that it's helpful to have a moderator who understands this, giving room to these egos a bit by, for example, kind of like saying like, hey, what's your take on this, and so on. So it's a kind of like to have a bit of peace for the ego of the people in the room, and by this creating an atmosphere which can then lead into a constructive discussion, right? But it's something as a board chair that you have to manage. And I think like it's also an interesting point about the composition of boards. Like currently what I'm seeing is like the board chair is usually the guy coming from the largest investor, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
But being the board chair is actually a moderator job. And I mean, we've both been active in EO, and you get a training there to become a moderator in a forum, right? So I think like I am not seeing board chairs usually having a moderator training, I would say. But maybe it would be good, right? So, and then the question is also like, is it either that the people who are taking the board chair should actually invest into their own education, like okay, how to manage a board, how to run a good discussion there, for example, how to handle a group of 5 people with a strong ego, for example, in a room. And there are actually education programs out there for board members. Like I've researched some of them myself very recently because I've also joined a board last year, and I'm thinking about like, okay, how to develop myself as a board member. But I think like probably 90% of the people that are currently on boards have, or 95% have not taken like any kind of education into that direction. So it's a bit of a lucky situation again. Do you have somebody who is bringing this experience from his own career to know how to manage a group like this, or is it maybe somebody who's not bringing that experience, right? So an interesting point to see. The worst experience that I had with ego is if an investor is maybe only a very small investor in your company, is therefore not sending a partner into your board, but is sending like an associate who's just coming from business school. And he thinks like, I just graduated from business school. I know exactly how the world runs. Worst case, he has done a 1 or 2 year kind of like work at I don't know, BCG, McKinsey. And then he says like, now I know how to run the world, and is sitting in your board. This is something that I've experienced, which was a bit of a problem. So there was somebody who, with like 1 year of work experience, who tried to explain to me in the board meeting how to run my business, and was like, "Sure, yeah, okay, nice." So this is very problematic, I would say, but can happen to you, right? So it's like, yeah, you also have to handle this. But if you have a really good board chair, then that board chair needs to have that person under control, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example of where, especially an independent board chair can really play the independence as an advantage, right? For an independent to have that one-on-one discussion with such a type VC and say, well, look, this is not exactly conducive to great boardroom dynamics, is so much easier than you as CEO, you as founder, right? Because you also have a hat, you also have a personal interest. I think that's really where this independence can be strongly leveraged to elevate the dynamics in the boardroom.
Absolutely. And that's basically, in the end, if you kind of like think this through, it's coming to the point where you think like, yeah, board member or board chair is actually like a professional job, right? Like, and I mean, there are people like you and others who are doing this, and I think it's like, I think it makes more and more sense to think about this and bring people on board who are doing this as a job, have maybe not only 1, but 3, 4, 5, 6 different board roles, are doing this on a regular basis, maybe have even taken some kind of training for this. Can be there are these programs for board members, but I think it also helps to have like, I don't know, like a coaching background or something, right? But really being able to, I think this is really something that could help to bring board meetings to, in general, board work to the next level.
I agree. I also just want to quickly re-emphasize what you picked up, all right? This notion of the importance of facilitating the meeting, of not doing that, just have no thought about how the meeting runs, but really say, okay, this topic is a topic where we want to get to a decision. How do we facilitate that? How do we best get to a discussion structure and a format that lends itself and which person should lead that part of the discussion? I think these are quintessential thoughts in advance of the board meeting. That's part of the meeting preparation as well. And as obvious as it seems, it's not that frequently done.
Also there, unfortunately, I've never experienced this. It would be great, right? To have like a board chair who's saying like, okay, what are the topics that we should discuss strategically on the board meeting? I mean, it's sometimes happening, right? Okay, it's like, okay, there are like 2 or 3 topics that will be important, but the 80%, 90% part of the board meetings that I'm seeing or have seen in the last 16 years was always, okay, management brings a presentation about the performance of the company, and best case is that there are like 1, 2 cases where real discussion is happening, but that's the typical format, I would say, like of a board meeting, right? But yeah, it could be also interesting to rethink how board meetings should actually be set up. For example, in our management meeting, like in my company, we are doing it differently. Like we have a management meeting every Monday morning. And when we started this, we always had these update parts, right? So every person on the meeting was talking about like, okay, what happened last week, challenges, roadblocks, like what's on the list for this week and so on. And this took like, I don't know, an hour, right? Like 6 people, 10 minutes each. Like, so you had 1 hour of like reporting. And then we never really had time for discussions.
Yep.
So we changed this format and said like, okay, we do written
Yes.
like all the points that we would have done in the update part, we do as a written update. So Monday morning, like every Monday morning, it's all of us into like a document, putting all of our notes. Like we look at the MIT's most important tasks. We work with that concept. We review the ones that everyone had last week. So we kind of like mark them green, yellow, red, like which worked, which didn't work, and then we have some written updates, and we put our most important tasks for this week, and that's a whole document. So everyone is basically in putting the input in before the meeting, and then at the beginning of the meeting we are reading through together, like everyone silently. It takes like 5, 6, 7 minutes, and then we just answer questions. Like if somebody's saying, yeah, I read your point about X, Y, Z, like can you explain a bit further and so on. And then the whole update part currently takes around 20 minutes, I would say.
Yes.
So this leaves us room. I think we even have a better quality of updates, because it's not just people coming into the room like, yeah, last week I did this and that, but it's written, it has more numbers, it has links to documents and stuff like this, right? So it has a higher quality of an update. Plus, it leaves us room for the important discussions, right? So
Yes.
now we rather have these discussions happening, and maybe it's also for board meetings to rethink a structure so that the reporting part is happening before. Or in a lot shorter format, for example, and instead of kind of like spending 80-90% of your time with like reporting, instead kind of like having a lot more time for discussion, right? So, but maybe, I mean, you're on more boards than I am, but maybe you're seeing boards where this is already happening. Unfortunately, I have not seen any board where it's done this way.
I try to really enforce that in all my boards. I introduce usually as the Jeff Bezos way, right? The 6-page memo, and I encourage the CEOs to write the board pack in prose and not in PowerPoint, same as the Amazon way, because I think it's context richer, and then really basically do the status update, the business update, mostly asynchronously. Right, really pre-meeting with annotated shared Google Docs. You make so much room for the real discussions in the boardroom. Why waste a good part of the most expensive meeting of the quarter in retrospect, in rear mirror, right? Why not spend it on forward-looking? What are the 2-3 big topics that we really need to have qualitative inputs or decisions or ideation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Beautiful. Anything that is very dear to your heart, Manuel, that we have not touched on for making boards work?
No, I think like looking at my notes, I think we've discussed most of the things. No, it was a very good ride through many topics, I would say here.
Maybe as you refer to your notes, they were heavily leveraged by AI tools, rightfully so, right? We talked a little bit about that pre-recording, and we established, you leading your company's AI engagement from the top as a power user very early, very intensely. What about the board in that aspect? To what extent is the board expected to be cutting edge on AI as well, to be credible and to really make sure that the company moves into that direction?
So with a board, it's very interesting. Like we discussed this before the podcast, that I'm the influencer in our company, how to use AI. I would say, and inspire people, like what use cases are possible. And I think the same into the board direction here. Like, since I'm also talking there quite a lot about like how I use Claude and other tools. Also, I inspired some of our board members who asked me after the board meeting, hey, can you send us the links of like certain, I don't know, like guides that you use to set up Claude Cowork and so on. So I think like the inspiration part also worked into that direction. And then, yeah, we obviously having also a lot of discussions with them about like the AI roadmap and the influence of AI on our business model. But it's I think it's what I see there is very similar to what I see everywhere, right? So like, there are certain people that are heavily using AI already, and then there are others that are still a bit kind of like starting, I would say, to explore the opportunities, possibilities that AI provides to you. But I think like the interesting part there is AI provides me as a CEO with the opportunity to prepare research documents a lot quicker and in a nicer way, also for board members to digest. So, for example, if I've done quite a bit of like I've prepared quite a lot of documents around like influence on AI of AI on our business model. Where can we build a moat? Where is the risk, for example, and so on. And I've done a lot with LLMs to basically work on these topics, and also like use LLMs as a sparring partner for me to think how should we think about this, and then take my, I would say, like extensive research that I've done and condense it into a format. And it can be, as you said, like the 6-page Amazon style paper for a board, or it can be a presentation or something, right? But it's really like, this is where I see really an advantage of AI. To basically take my extensive research and condense it into a format that works for a board, and especially for board members that also have other duties in their life, right? And are not working full-time on a company like I do. And this is where I use it, for example, a lot, and where it helps me a lot, and which would usually cost me a lot of time to prepare it in a way. And I think this is a way, in the end, also to keep the board more informed, because usually I would have not built presentations for this or papers for this like all the time just to keep the board informed about certain topics. But with the help of AI, I can create more, I don't know, let's say like 8 to 10 slide presentations around certain topics, where I said, like, look, guys, I think for our discussions, it's also helpful that you know about this and know about this and know about that, right? And so I think like in general, it will lead to a situation where the board is probably better informed, because I have more information prepared in a good way for them to digest, and which in the end should improve the discussions that we are having in the boardroom.
Yeah, beautiful. To conclude, Manuel, if you could, for your own company, design your dream board, like sometimes in sports, they have this dream team question kind of, and again, it can be real specific people, dead or alive, but it can also be more descriptions, kind of how would your dream board look like?
Yeah. As always, it depends, right, on the company. Like, so I would look at the company, like which industry is it in? What's the business model? What's the strategy, right? Is it a buy and build case like we are currently running? Is it something different? And also looking at the management team and the value drivers also for the company, right? So kind of like analyzing first, okay, what's the situation of the company, team, business model, and so on, and then trying to understand, okay, how would a board look like in order to make sure that this is helpful for the company. And then it's talking about complementarity, right? We talked about this. So having a complementary board, and then we talked about the different spectrums. I would probably bring somebody from the financial side. That person would be probably always there, because it's people bringing the money, so they are very often part of the board. But I think it's also good to have these people on board, right? Because like there's always something around like financing, M&A, and so on, financial reporting, whatever, where it's helpful to have the spreadsheet background people on board. So having somebody from that side, having somebody from the operator side, definitely, who has been in the shoes of the management. Best case, that person also brings some industry experience, right? So second person. And then we discussed this in the third category, having somebody who comes from the people background side. So somebody who understands organizational development, people who can help with picking the right people. If you want to expand the management team, if you need to change something in the organization, being a sparring partner also there through the management team. So if I could pick 3 roles, I would say like it would be these 3 roles. And I don't know if you need many more people on the board, because I think also what I've seen is also the larger the board, lesser the quality, right? So I think like with a board of like 3, 4, max 5 people, I think that's a perfect size, because like if you bring the management with like, I don't know, 2, 3 people, it's already like 6 to 8 people in the room, right? Yeah, so I think that's the maximum that you should have there.
Yeah.
But if I would only build a board of 3, I would make sure that you have these 3 types of people on the board, and then if it's 4 or 5, like you could think about like adding maybe additional skills, maybe bringing somebody with a network. For example, there are certain businesses where it's like super helpful. Like a friend of mine was running a logistics company, for example, where it was like very important to have like context to all the carriers, shipping companies, and so on. So if you need this as a company, it can be obviously helpful to bring somebody on the board who has that kind of network. But that's why I'm saying, like, it really depends on the company. But so base setup that I think could be valuable for every company. If kind of like if we're not saying it depends on, but kind of like just the base setup. One with a spreadsheet background, one with the operator background, one with the people background. So this could be the base set, and from there you can build up.
Very cool. Thank you. I think this we got back to this triangle framework quite a few times.
Yeah.
I think it's a very, very key insight, and I look forward to thinking more about that triangle. Manuel, thank you for a very engaged, very insightful conversation. Always a pleasure to learn from you. And I'm certain not just me, but also our audience will take a lot of value from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.